Okay, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about MAP sensors. Right? On these Crossfire cars, it works the same on every car, but here's your MAP sensor location on the '84 Corvette. And so today I want to talk just a little bit about what it does and how it operates. Okay, so in the previous picture you saw it's a 3-wire sensor. Here it is in the wiring diagram. It's got 5 volts going to it. It's got a ground going to it. So these are the first things you check. Key on, engine off. Do I have 5 volts? Do I have a good ground, 12 volts from a positive battery, right? And then it's got the input wire, that light green wire. This tells the ECM what kind of load the engine's under. And then on the output side of the ECM, it says, okay, I'm under this load. This is how much on time the injector should be on. So more load, more on time. Less load, less on time. So if we have a vacuum leak of any kind, whether it's the intake manifold or an old cracked vacuum line, then the MAP sensor is going to pick this up and it's going to give the car less fuel because it thinks it's under less load due to a smaller amount of vacuum, which is going to either cause running conditions or code, right? So here's your MAP sensor, right? It's got one vacuum line, comes off of the MAP sensor and goes to the driver's side throttle box. Now what it's doing is it's measuring pressure or vacuum inside the intake manifold, and it's going to adjust the fuel dependent on the load, and it works the load, it determines the load by throttle position and MAP sensor. So when your car is idling, you're usually around what, 16, 18 inches of vacuum, depending, and that's because the throttle plates are closed, the air is being pulled inside the engine, but there's a restriction from above the throttle plates to below the throttle plates. Okay? So when it sees that, typically idle, you're about 1.2 volts, somewhere right around there. And as you step on the throttle and put more load into the car, then what happens? The throttle plates open up, and the difference between vacuum and pressure below and above the throttle plates start to disappear, right? So as you finally get to wide open throttle and the throttle plates are wide open, well, there's no difference in the air pressure up here than there is in the air pressure inside the engine, right? So when the throttle's closed, you have all this vacuum pulling air through that throttle plate and through the IAC motors. But as you start to open the throttle, the air pressure equals out. Okay? So, like I said, at about idle, you're usually about 1.2 volts. And if you go to wide open throttle, under full load, then what happens is the voltage goes from about 1.4 to about 4.5, somewhere in there. And so it's sensing the difference or lack of difference, once again, between atmosphere and engine. And if there's a lot of difference, lower voltage, then it goes, oh, okay, I'm not working that hard, I don't need to do much, I can keep the fuel injectors on for a smaller amount of on time. But as it sees the throttle plates open, and it sees that the load increases, then the voltage changes in the MAP sensor, which is going to change the injection pulse width on the two throttle bodies. Right? So it's looking at the throttle position, right? As you open the throttles, it looks at that, and then it also looks at the MAP sensor to see what the vacuum change is going to do, right? Because, like I said, when you're at idle, you're at about 16, 18 inches of vacuum. When you're at wide open throttle, you have no vacuum, right? You have atmospheric pressure. So the difference between 0 and 18 is the difference between load and no load, right? So no load, about 1.2 volts, load, about 4.5 volts, right? So it takes a couple of things into play besides the MAP sensor. It also looks at the throttle position. It looks at the coolant as well. But your MAP sensor is probably one of your biggest fuel related sensors, right? That and throttle position. Throttle position is about 0.6, somewhere around there on these crossfire motors at idle, 4.5 wide open throttle. So it sees, if it sees 1.2 volts with a little over a half a volt on the throttle position, it goes, hey, don't give this engine much fuel. We're not doing anything but sitting at a traffic light, right? And then as the throttle position goes from 1.2 to maybe 2.4, 3.2, and this starts to go up to 2.3, 2.6, then it says, hey, you know what? We're moving down the road and I'm demanding more fuel. Let's go ahead and change the pulse width of the injectors, add more fuel, right? And then, like I said, you're all of a sudden you want to pass somebody out on the highway, you go to wide open throttle, kick it down a gear, then what? Your throttle position's at 4.5, your MAP sensor's close to 4.5, right? And that's saying, hey, give me as much fuel as you possibly can, right? So there's not a whole lot of information on these older crossfire cars. I guess that's why they're somewhat difficult to diagnose. You only have one O2 sensor, and that's on the driver's side, right? So what happens if the passenger side goes lean? Well, the engine doesn't see that. It only sees what the driver's side does. What if the driver's side goes rich? What's it going to do? It's going to subtract fuel, and then if the right side was lean already, then it's even going to go leaner, right? So so you don't have much in the way of operating controls, right? Later on, we ended up putting an O2 sensor on both sides, and we started judging different things and looking at different parameters to help us control the fuel. But in these early cars, you got to remember, this is basically the first fuel injected car, right? Was the throttle body cars. And then of course this has got two throttle bodies, so it's a little different than let's say a 350 pickup truck from the 80s. But basically it's the same thing. They don't have many sensors. They have one O2 sensor, one throttle position sensor that control that if this side's saying it's at idle, then this side should be at idle. And provided you have your throttle plates timed correctly, then that should be right. I have several videos on synchronizing the throttle bodies to make sure that they are pulling the same amount of vacuum at the same time. So just a quick little video. Like I said, I wanted to throw that out there because I've seen a lot of questions on the MAP sensor and how that thing works. If you have a scan tool, then you can look at the pressure and the voltage, right? And you can do that running and see what you have there. but it's basically a 5-volt reference with a ground and a sense wire, right? Or a signal wire, whatever you want to call it. And so that's how that works, right? You got 5 volts in the ground going in, and then the signal going back to the ECM saying this is what we need to do. Alright guys, thanks a lot for watching my videos. I greatly appreciate it. If you could like and subscribe, I'd appreciate that as well. Thank you. Have a great day.